Hello and welcome once again. My name is Natty Cash, and welcome to part 6 of the Ultimate March Madness Tournament. If you haven't seen the first ones, please look at the description. There's a link to part 1 in the video. We're going to have a fair bit of spoilers now at this point, so please make sure that you go back and you check out part 1 if you haven't already. Otherwise, if you're here, you've seen a fair bit already, let's dig into it. So as you can see, we are a quarter of the way through all the 16 regional brackets. You can see the first 4 of our final 16 that we have left here. Our next stop is going to be in Birmingham, Alabama, where we're going to see the South region played out today. So here are the teams for the South region, starting with the Auburn Tigers, a 27-8 record, 4th in the SEC, but went on to win the league championships in the SEC, a strong contender here for the number 1 seed. They will be awaiting a playoff match between the Kennesaw State Owls and the Idaho State Bengals. The Owls come from the Atlantic Sun region with a 15-16 record overall, and the Idaho State Bengals are from the Big Sky Conference, 14-20 as a record overall. Did well to have an upset in their playoff region, beating Northern Colorado, but could not get the final win against number 3 Montana. This should be a good matchup. Next up, we see the number 9 team, which is the Michigan Wolverines, a bottom dweller in the Big Ten region, but now with a new spring in life, can they go ahead and potentially go on a run? But they're going to have to start off by facing the number 8 Oklahoma State Cowboys, a 12-20 record. Again, struggled in the Big 12, right? 2 struggling teams we see here in big conferences. We will see who comes out on top. Next up, we're going to see the number 5 seed, the Bulldogs from Butler, an 18-15 record overall, 9-11 Big East record. We'll see what they can do, but they'll have to wait on a playoff round between the Alabama A&M Bulldogs and the St. Peter's Peacocks. The Bulldogs from the SWAC region, 7th in their league, overall with a 12-23 record. They will go up against the Cinderella team from previous years, St. Peter's, coming from the Mid-Atlantic Conference, seeing the 5th in their league, but they went along and beat their number 1 seed and number 2 seed in their region to be league champs. Let's see what St. Peter's can do in this type of format. Then we see a playoff round between the Midshipmen from Navy and the Vikings out of Cleveland State. A 13-18 record for Navy gives them a 7th in the Patriot League, and they are going up against the Vikings from the Horizon League, 7th in their respective league as well. So then they are waiting up against the number 4 seed, the Virginia Tech Hokies, 19-15 record overall, 10-10 in the ACC, good enough for 8th in their league. We will see what they can do in a strong number 4 position. As we move towards the bottom of the bracket, we will then introduce our number 3 seed, being the Cincinnati Bearcats, a 22-15 record, good enough for 11th in the Big 12, a big competitive Big 12. They were able to surprise and beat the number 6 ranked Kansas in their conference tournament, so we'll see what they can do in a number 3 seed position. They are awaiting a playoff match between the Old Dominion Monarchs and the Eastern Kentucky Colonels. The Monarchs with a 7-23 record, near the bottom of the Sun Belt record. Let's see if they can put that behind them and go on a run here. But they have to do it against the Eastern Kentucky Colonels with a 17-14 record, 12-4 in the Atlantic Sun. Meant that they were first in the Atlantic Sun region. Unfortunately, they had lost to Jacksonville early in their conference tournament and didn't make the March Madness tournament this year. Is this going to be redemption for them in this tournament? Next up, we have another play-in round. First up against Long Island University, the Sharks. They're going to have to face the Oregon State Beavers. The Sharks come out of the Northeast Conference, and they are 7th from that conference with a 6-10 record in that conference, 7-22 overall. With up against the Beavers from Oregon State. Again, struggled in the Pac-12, but we'll see what they can do in this tournament. 13-19 record overall. Awaiting that result is the number 6 seed, the St. Joseph Hawks, 21-14 record, 9-9 in the Atlantic 10, good enough for 9th in that league. Did go on a decent run, beating the number 1 ranked team from their Atlantic 10 region, Richmond, before losing out to VCU. Then we see further down, the number 7 seed will be the Georgia Bulldogs, a 2017 record coming out of the SEC, 11th in a tough SEC. We'll see what they can do now in a 7th seed position. They are then awaiting another play-in game between the Houston Christian Huskies and the Wyoming Cowboys. The Huskies coming out of the Southland region with a 4-14 record, 6-23 overall. They are then playing the Cowboys out of the Mountain West, who did struggle, getting 8th in the Mountain West, and they had a 15-17 record overall. The last play-in round we see here is the UMBC Retrievers up against the Abilene Christian Wildcats. The Retrievers, 11-21 record. That's good enough for 7th in the America East Conference. We'll see what they can do. They've had their Cinderella moments in previous March Madness tournaments. We'll see what they can do up against the Abilene Christian Wildcats. 10-10 out of the WAC conference, 7th in their league. See what they can do. But awaiting them is the Indiana State Sycamores, a 32-7 record, 17-3 in the Missouri Valley Conference, 1st in their league. They just unfortunately had lost in their finals of the conference to Drake, meaning that they did not make it to the March Madness tournament. Can they now take that fire and make a run in the South region? So this is what we see in the South region. What are your predictions? Put them down in the description or in the comments below. And then let's go ahead and simulate one game at a time to see who will be our South region representative. First up, we will have Kennesaw State up against Idaho State. A big back and forth game with many lead changes, but it is the Owls of Kennesaw State that get a basket late to eventually get the win here. Right? Many lead changes all the way across, even all the way through, as it should be, to see a Kennesaw State victory. So we see Kennesaw State moving forward to play the number 1 Auburn in their next matchup. Up next, we have the Bulldogs from Alabama A&M playing against the St. Peter's Peacocks. And it is the Peacocks from St. Peter's College that get the victory here. They took the lead early and were able to go and make a dominant win in their opening matchup. Let's see if they can continue this into the rest of the tournament. So we see the Peacocks moving forward, seeing that they are matched up against Butler in their next game. We'll move on to the next play-in game where we have the Midshipmen from Navy playing the Cleveland State Vikings. And we see Navy coming away with the victory. They took the lead early and really always maintained somewhere around a 6 to 8 point lead and finished off with a 10-point victory to move on to the next round. And so we see Navy moving forward, lining up against Virginia Tech in their next matchup. And next up on the bottom of the bracket, we see the Monarchs from Old Dominion facing off against the Eastern Kentucky Colonels. And we see here another close matchup, but it is the Colonels of Eastern Kentucky that move forward. Few lead changes throughout, as we see across the first half and the second half. And it wasn't until a nice run by the Eastern Kentucky Colonels that got them the victory. Great job. We'll see who you match up with in the next round. So it will be the Colonels playing the Cincinnati Bearcats in the next round. Our next plan, we have the Long Island University Sharks up against the Beavers from Oregon State. And we do see the Beavers of Oregon State taking home the victory. They took a lead early in the first half and never looked back, cruising to a 20-point victory in their first round. And we see that Oregon State now is awaiting their matchup against the Hawks from St. Joseph's. Our next play-in, we see the Huskies of Houston Christian up against the Wyoming Cowboys. And we see a very close matchup between both teams. Wyoming had the lead for the majority of the game, but Houston could always close the gap a few times, but eventually it was Wyoming that had the 3-point victory in the end. A close matchup, but it is the Cowboys that move forward. And as we can see, the Cowboys are now awaiting their matchup against the Georgia Bulldogs. Now we see the UMBC Retrievers up against the Wildcats from Abilene Christian. And we see another close matchup between the two. UMBC had the lead for the majority of the first half, but not by much as Abilene Christian held their own. And it wasn't until the very end that Abilene Christian had their first lead of the game, and it was enough to take home the victory. And we see the Wildcats moving on. And so with that, here's a look at the 16 teams we see moving into the next round. Now we go through each one to see who will be in our regional quarterfinals, starting at the top with Auburn and Kennesaw State. And we do see Auburn with a resounding victory in the end. It was close for most of the first half, but once Auburn got a significant lead, they never looked back to move forward to the next round. Next up, we see the Michigan Wolverines up against the Cowboys from Oklahoma State. And we see the Cowboys with the victory here. It was Michigan that was leading near the entire game, but a nice run in the last moments of the game for Oklahoma State brought them the lead and the victory. So the Cowboys are moving on to play Auburn in the next round. So with our first quarterfinal matchup made, we'll keep on going, and we're going to see if the Butler Bulldogs can go ahead and defeat the St. Peter's Peacocks, or is it the Peacocks that are going to go on a surprising run? And another tight matchup in this bracket, but it is the Bulldogs that pull off the victory. St. Peter's had a lead for most of the first half, but Butler was able to work hard in the second half and gain the lead and maintain it all the way to a 6-point victory. So we see Butler moving forward. Their opponent will be the winner between the Midshipmen from Navy and the Virginia Tech Hokies. And we do see the Hokies moving on to the next round. They did take a lead and maintain that, but it was close throughout most of the game. And even Navy tried to push back, but could not close the deficit enough, leading to a Hokies 7-point victory. With half of the bracket determined with our quarterfinals, we now move down to the bottom half where we see the Bearcats taking on the Colonels from Eastern Kentucky. And it is the Bearcats that take care of business and get the victory. Once they took the lead halfway through the first half, they were able to build that lead all the way to a comfortable victory. So with Cincinnati moving on, they are awaiting their next opponent, which will be between the Oregon State Beavers and the Hawks coming out of St. Joseph's. And we now see our first upset of the bracket, where it is the Beavers that get the victory. A back and forth game with many lead changes throughout, but it is Oregon State that maintained their lead for most of the second half. The Hawks did come back, but it was one last surge by the Beavers to take home the victory. And so we see our first double-digit seed from this region moving into the quarterfinals. We'll see if they can make a story of it and go on a run. But until that, we have to wait for our next matchups, which will be the Georgia Bulldogs versus the Cowboys from Wyoming. And it is Wyoming that get the victory here. They were leading most of the game. Georgia pushed hard to make it close before the end of the first half. But in the second half, Wyoming took over again, grew their lead, and maintained that all the way to a 9-point victory. And so we see our second double-digit seed in this region move on to the quarterfinals. Will we get a third with Abilene Christian Wildcats, or will it be the Sycamores of Indiana State that will move forward to the next round? And it is Indiana State that will get the victory. Maybe it was closer than what most people would have predicted, with back and forth lead changes throughout most of the first half. But once Indiana State got on a run, they were able to maintain a reasonable 10-point spread for most of it, although Abilene Christian did get within 4 at one point, but one more surge allowed the Sycamores to get the victory and move to the next round. And with Indiana State moving forward, we have all of our matchups for the regional quarterfinals. Then starting again at the top, we will then see who makes it to the semifinals. Will it be the Auburn Tigers or the Oklahoma State Cowboys? And once again, we do see the Auburn Tigers take care of business with a decisive win here. No doubt about it, as they took a lead and never looked back, on their way to a dominant win. Next up, we will see the Bulldogs out of Butler taking on the Virginia Tech Hokies for a spot in the regional semifinals. And we see a very close matchup here. Many lead changes back and forth, and it's a final basket and a surge by the Virginia Tech Hokies that get the narrow margin victory. Very close back and forth, and it's just that the Bulldogs were just a little too short on this day. So with one semifinal matchup made, let's see what our next semifinal matchup will look like, starting with the Bearcats from Cincinnati playing against the Oregon State Beavers. And we see Oregon State's run come to an end as the Bearcats take care of business here. Was a close game to start with, but Cincinnati got on a run, were able to maintain their lead all the way through to our victory. Now, with just one quarterfinal matchup left, we're starting to see the semifinals take shape, but we are still awaiting the matchup between the Wyoming Cowboys and the Sycamores from Indiana State. And so as you can see, the Sycamores have taken care of business. They got a lead early and continued to build that lead all the way through to a very comfortable 30-point victory. So we can see here the top 4 teams from the region all moving into the semifinals. This is the first time that we've seen it thus far in this tournament. Should mean that we're going to have some great semifinal matchups and a great final matchup in the end as well. But to find all that out, we have to start with the Auburn Tigers versus the Virginia Tech Hokies. And we do have a very close one here with a few lead changes back and forth, but it is the Tigers that do get the victory. It looks like they had a good lead in the first half, where the Hokies closed that in as it came to halftime. Then Virginia Tech went on a run. We're up by as much as 6. Okay, but it is the Tigers that had one last push in them to leapfrog them once again and get their berth into the regional finals. And Auburn will then be awaiting the other semifinal matchup between the Bearcats from Cincinnati and the Indiana State Sycamores. And another tight battle as a semifinal with a few lead changes here and there, but it is the Sycamores that will be moving on to the finals. Very close in the first half, and it was Cincinnati that were able to get up to a 7-point lead, but a big surge by the Sycamores put them in front before half. And even though the Bearcats pushed and even equalized, it was the Sycamores that were able to pull out the victory in the end. And now we are down to the South Region Finals. The second time that we've seen so far in this tournament where a 1 and 2 seed has made it this far, where we see the Auburn Tigers taking on the Indiana State Sycamores. Who is going to be able to put out another win to move on to our final 16 teams? And it is Auburn that has done enough to move on to the final 16. They took a lead and they are able to build a pretty early 11-point lead. And even though Sycamores pushed back to try to reduce the deficit a couple times, they could never surpass them. And the Tigers pushed forward one last time to get a decisive victory to move as our representative of the South Region. And now we see Auburn as the third #1 seed to make it to this part of the tournament. What a great bracket to see. Next video, we will be taking a look at the Rocky Mountain region. Our #1 seed from there is BYU. Will BYU be able to maintain the streak of #1 seeds moving on to this part of the tournament, or will there be another team that can step up in that region and become a final 16 participant? Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.